Everybody, welcome to this episode of The Flight Path, Sonoran Desert Institute's podcast on everything uncrewed industry. Cool tech, cool stuff, topical things like we're going to be talking about today. I have the whole gang with us. So Steve Ross, Director of Marketing, Don Heon, UAS System Specialist, and our Program Chair of Uncrewed Technology, James McDaniels. Say hi, everybody.
Hey guys.
How you doing?
So all right, so we brought up some topical stuff. We've been having some conversation about it. You sent us a link about it, but we're talking about shooting down drones that are spying on me in Florida. You're talking about Florida Man.
Yeah,
and the drones. What's going on, James? You're the one who sent the article. I'm interested.
Yep. So this isn't just about Florida Man. This is about a lot of people down in Florida, really. Because imagine, for it to get to this level where there is a bill actually proposed, there's got to be enough people having problems with drones flying over their backyards. People think they're getting spied on, to where this really comes into effect and actually becomes a proposed bill like it is right now. So essentially, what this bill is stating is that it is allowable to use reasonable force to take down a drone that is invading your privacy, like from your own home. That's a pretty big deal, because that whole statement, use of reasonable force, is not defined. It's not defined at all. So for what people consider reasonable, that's a broad span we're talking about here, guys. Here, let me ask the question now. Steve, what do you think is reasonable use of force? What would you define as reasonable?
Here we go.
It's no, you're right. It's truly wild that the state of Florida, and I'm from Florida, is giving people the green light to defend their airspace. And what does that mean?
It means one thing.
I think it, to me, it means if I can see it, it's in my airspace.
Okay.
And what's reasonable? You're fully auto.
What's reasonable force?
Or shotgun, bow and arrow.
My heat-seeking cannon that releases bees. I don't know, like anything that can take it down.
What problems do we see with the lack of understanding of reasonable force?
Well, obviously, for one, you could be killing a lot of bees, and that's no good for the environment.
I got a bee cannon. Leave me alone.
Yeah, but you got to think about the bees. You got to think about pollination and all that fun stuff. Not the bees, but in any case, the problem with it is that, listen, for those who don't know about the state law, right, as the reasonable force, well, there's also a federal law. It's 18 USC 32 alpha, and that law specifically states that it is illegal to damage or take down aircraft. And drones, even small drones, are considered aircraft, considered part of that. And people have gotten in trouble and arrested in the past in Florida, in New York, for shooting at or shooting down drones. The one in Florida specifically was from a 26-year-old who was shooting at a drone that was being used for a search and rescue operation and trying to find someone missing. So the issue is that if someone perceives reasonable force and it's not clearly defined as, what reasonable force is to take down a drone, you got people blasting into the sky. Bullets don't just go up; they come down. So there's that on the firearm safety side. But then there's also the factor, if you just blast this thing out of the sky, okay, is it landing on someone else's house, property, car, someone who's standing under it at the time who may just be trying to get a nice little droney aerial selfie of their family, and we perceive it as someone who's invading your privacy? Yeah, you're not just in trouble with whoever has property damage, you're in trouble with the Federal Aviation Administration now, too.
This definitely feels like one of those bills or laws, like it sounds good in theory, but it's going to get real messy real quick in practice.
Don, from your perspective, how messy do you see this getting, just from what we've talked about?
Well, the Florida legislatures don't have a leg to stand on here. They don't. I mean, this bill's going to fall flat on its face.
Why do you say that?
Because they don't have jurisdiction over the airspace. That plain and simple. I mean, they can complain and whine and argue all they want trying to pass this bill, but it's just going to fall flat on its face.
Who's their fight going to be? The federal government? The FAA?
Mainly with the FAA, and the federal government who set those laws forward. Federal always takes precedence over state. So the issue that's happening here is that, like as someone said, someone had thought they had a really good idea to say, hey, let's make our constituents happy. Let's propose a law that allows people to, take down drones that are worried about their privacy, without thinking, oh wait, there's already a law that says that's illegal. So it's a matter of, if someone does follow this law, if it is enacted, and someone says, hey, it's within my state right to do so, well, someone from the federal level who precedes state is still going to come after you in some way, shape, or form, no matter the situation.
However,
it's so funny. As a Florida man, I can see the argument from people in Florida from both sides saying, you can't own the air, Don. You can't own the air, James. And that could be pro or for this bill.
Wish I could be a fly.
Here's the thing. There are plenty, well, I wouldn't say plenty. There's some sensitive laws out there that the state still does what they want to do and the federal government stays out of the way. So, there's certain shops out there that sells particular things where, yeah, it's against federal law, but the states still do it. Could it be something like that?
And who is this going to be a problem for? Is it going to be a problem for drone pilots, or is it going to be a problem for people on the ground that decide, I'm going to defend my airspace? Who is going to be having the most?
Answer my question first.
I didn't even hear. You didn't even have a question.
Hey, listen, he did speak first. He did go first in the pecking order.
Sorry, Christian.
Marijuana, you can sell marijuana at the state level. It's allowed, but federally, it's not allowed.
I mean, you make a pretty good point there, actually.
And it does pose a challenging question, right? Question it. So, because I was about to say, well, what about safety to the people and property on the ground? Well, people who get high and drive, well, yeah, they're a danger to everyone around them, right?
It's the law. It's already a law.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yes, that's already a law. Like, to drive under the influence is against the law. You can't do that. So but see, here's the difference. Right? That restriction is pretty well defined. There's a exception to the rule. Well, the state may say, hey, it's okay to sell marijuana. It's okay for you to take it recreationally, or for medicinal usages. You can't drive, you can't operate equipment, you can't do things that would pose a risk to others while under the influence of it. It's the same with alcohol. So there is a specific definition, or there's a counter law that keeps it within a reasonable expectation of safety. And that's the thing here, is that right now, federal, state level, there's a conflicting statement, right? And there's no well-defined statement of reasonable force. And
so they'd have to define reasonable force for it to kind of be accepted then.
Correct. There needs to be a better definition. There needs to be exceptions. There needs to be something that states, hey, are you allowed to take this thing down with, your Mossberg anytime you want, or, take crackpots at it with an M9 when it's, 100 feet in the air? Good luck hitting that when it's moving. Or is there counter UAS solutions, stuff that has to do with radio frequency jamming that you could put on your house that, tells the drone to land or tell it to go back home and so forth, right? So go ahead, Don.
Let me propose this question, though. As far as reasonable force, what would you consider reasonable force from an average homeowner? I mean, an average homeowner is not going to go out and buy counter UAS stuff to put on their house. Exactly. I mean, reasonable force is like, what other choice do you have as a homeowner? A firearm, right?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. Well, I mean, you got slingshots.
Who's that? Like,
okay.
David? Like, are you?
I mean, okay, technically that's right.
Listen, Seth.
Or are you covering
on the target practice? Sorry.
Does everyone just cover their house with material that protects their privacy?
Well, here's the thing, right? Privacy. Let's get into that. Like, what's the expectation of privacy? Tell me a very clear defined definition of reasonable expectation of privacy.
I'm going to say when you're inside of your house. Not
So
when
not
you're
even
in your backyard. Nope.
Oh, crazy.
There's no reasonable expectation of privacy when you're in your backyard or your front yard because you're in public view.
Okay,
Well, there goes my tanning habits.
but if your blinds or your window curtains are open, you can do whatever you want. So your neighbors walking by on your sidewalk. So even inside your house, you have some limitations to privacy.
Well, the question is though, who has control over the blinds? Do you have control over the blinds?
Right.
So if you have the control over the blinds,
No,
you
I
decide to
thought this
open
was
those blinds.
America.
You're welcoming.
Don't force
You're
me to
welcoming.
shut my blind.
Well, it may be America, but there's also common sense. So if you have control over your blinds, do you have control over the ability for other people to see inside as you are?
If you don't like what's going on inside my house, turn away. Just like we tell people, change the station if you don't want to hear what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
Well, that's the thing. They can record you. So, like, so do you have a reasonable expectation of not to be recorded from however far away a drone can record you from, while you're doing your thing in front of your blinds?
Can you close the blinds once you realize your privacy is invaded?
Is there not equipment and technology that could be above my house and use thermal to see what I'm doing and where I'm walking through my house and activities?
Wait, what?
Is there thermal equipment that could see through my windows, through my walls, and track somebody in a house? Or even could they track where I am with my phone walking around my house?
IR detects radiated power, so it can't see through windows and it can't see through walls.
Well, yeah, it can't see through windows, that's correct, or walls, that's correct.
Yeah.
It can see through light materials like thin plastic, like a trash bag, but it cannot see through glass. It cannot see through hard walls. It's not an X-ray machine. It can't see heat that it can't have reflected directly back to it without anything blocking it. So, like, imagine if you had a tree in front of your window too. You have a tree in front of your house. It could see the tree, but it couldn't see the house. That's how infrared and then thermal works. Really, to see anything like past it, that you're talking about like X-ray type vision kind of stuff. And for anybody who wants to like go and invade someone's privacy and pay like that much money and invest that much money to have an X-ray sensor on carrying on a drone, holy cow, they got to be government. But in any case, or some commercial company developing them. But yeah. The thermal
I know it's extreme, but also I mean, that's why we have defenders of the Second Amendment as well. Like we're not always afraid of just a average Joe taking our rights away. It is the government that has those technology. I know we're getting tinfoil hat stuff here, but it's extreme, but it could happen.
Yeah, no, it could happen, and that's the thing where I like what you said. Is there technologies out there that someone could put on their house that would essentially, stop these things from being able to come within a certain distance of your house? Because as it sits right now, nobody has control over the airspace except for the Federal Aviation Administration. I hate to say it, nobody likes to hear it, but the Federal Aviation Administration has full control. Like say even if you have your drone a foot off the ground in your backyard, that's the FAA's airspace. They can tell you where and how to fly in it. Even if the drone is below your height of how you're standing, but that's just how it is currently. There's different ways that this can be approached. One of them is the counter UAS field, right? And to know how to better counter UAVs, you need to know how they work internally. So it goes along the lines of educating and knowing what things are for, just like educating people to better be able to fix and do gunsmithing and work on firearms and be safe using guns, doing the same around drones, learning more about them and saying, okay, this uses this kind of telemetry. Instead of taking this thing down with kinetic force, can I flood its telemetry signal or create a little microcomputer on a radio that can tell this thing and Mavlink protocols, hey, you're in my airspace, land now, or initiate return to home functionality. And then it just starts flying home and it can't get past a certain point. Think of like an invisible fence that's there that no one can see, and all it takes is a little antenna on the top of your roof, or even or patch antenna on a window or something, right? Something to transmit the signal that tells the drone, hey, don't come into this area. Stop where you are, essentially. So Don, I see gears turning. What's going on?
Well, yeah, I mean, you just went into the weeds there, but I was trying to follow you. Are you saying that a homeowner could put something on this window to essentially like tell a drone that there's a geofence that can't go past this area?
Think of like well, not necessarily like something on the window. I'm talking about having something like a small size computer that you plug into power, and that power provides to an antenna that's connected to the computer, and that antenna sits on top of your house, or it's a patch antenna facing a window, and it creates that signal from the antenna around your house that pretty much is a drone denier, if you will, or
Well,
puts out
a
radio
drone doesn't
frequency.
even need to be close, right? To take pictures of you.
Right. I mean, you look at the
like
Mavic 3 Enterprise and it has a 56 times zoom, optical zoom.
Yeah.
So
so.
you can zoom in from 3 blocks away and see someone in their window, and they wouldn't even know you're flying.
Or the M30 or the M30T, which has I think it's 100 times zoom, where you
Yeah,
could be a
so
quarter mile away and see the dials on a keypad for a door.
what's good is a geofence around your property then.
Yeah,
Unless somebody was doing one of those one-time use drones on you, there would be no other other need for a geofence, really.
but then there's even the consideration of like using something with kinetic force and like saying, okay, what's a reasonable distance away from your home to be able to take down a drone, too? Like, are you even hearing it at a quarter mile away? That's the thing. It
How do you
becomes a real challenge.
right? And how do you decide what's a threat and what's a non-threat? What if it's just your neighbor's real estate agent taking pictures of their house for a listing, and you
And
decide to
oftentimes it is.
right?
Office times?
Oftentimes
Oh, oftentimes. Got it.
it is.
No,
Just
I'm-
during
I'm-
business hours.
no, and that's the thing. Like, okay, now let's go back to the bill, right? Imagine this bill actually does get put into effect, and you're a drone operator. For an example, you're an operator who's contracted out by an HOA to take photos in the neighborhood for roadway inspections or roadway fixes, right? Well, okay, you're going to fly, and someone who's not really active with their HOA or understands what the HOA is doing sees this drone flying over doing passes over its house. It's like, oh, that thing's invading my privacy. I'm going to take it down. Well, they were given permission from the HOA to fly. They were actually contracted by the HOA and so forth to fly it and do it. And now the drone's on the ground. So what do you do in that situation? It's another thing that now operators in Florida, commercial wise, are going to have to think about that as an additional potential risk as well.
Okay, so before this law goes into effect, so here's a question for you: are there unwritten rules as drone pilots you guys follow now that respect people's privacy?
So I would say one of the big factors is that when we have to conduct, it all depends on the application, right? So if you're doing GIS for a neighborhood or say an apartment there's no way to not be flying over someone's property. But what I have done with companies I've worked with in the past is that for any business or person that we're flying over or is in the operational area, we went as far as to actually put up written notices on people's doors saying, hey, we're going to be flying at this date, flying around this time. Don't be concerned. We're not gathering data about you or we're gathering data about your surroundings, and here's what it's being used for, and gave them the background. It's about that public outreach. So I would say, yes, there's things that can be done. It's right now it's an unspoken rule, but if it became something that came into effect, it would need to be something that's more of a standardized practice, because you need to notify people ahead of time saying, hey, we're going to be flying. Please don't shoot us down. Please. We're begging you. We're doing this for good.
And I have a part two to that question. I don't know, Don, if you want to answer that as well.
I was just going to piggyback on that and say I've been in that type of experience where I had to fly and map like a couple hundred acres of a home development. And I was fortunate to be in the work truck at the time. But when the drone was flying over, it was, 250 feet, and it's the Matrice 300, 350 RTK. So you can definitely tell that there's a drone up in the air. And I had a lady come up to me, and she just basically wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing anything I wasn't supposed to be doing. And I told her, well, I'm just here for mapping. I'm just going to survey this area. I just want to show you that, you know, because she was telling me that her kids were out in her pool and her family was out there, and she wanted to make sure that, you know, I wasn't doing anything I was supposed to not be doing. So I showed her on the screen and kind of educated her on the process that I'm doing, and she was okay with it once she kind of understood what was going on. But I've been in those situations before, and sometimes the best thing that you can do is just educate that individual.
Exactly. It all comes back to that outreach as well. Sorry.
Yeah, so you can do your due diligence, even if you guys have the best of intentions as drone pilots to explain and educate to people in the area. But at the end of the day, do the people on the ground that don't want to be caught up in what you're filming or what you're performing have any actual protection to say, nope, you have to stop? Can they actually do anything about it?
Technically, no, because you're in the airspace. You're not, let's say you take off from private property, right? Then that's illegal, right? The person that's you know, has responsibility over that private property could say something to you. But if you're flying from public property, you take off from public property. Once you're in the airspace, the FAA has jurisdiction over the airspace. So, I mean, you're free and clear. So technically, no.
Have you guys encountered anybody that did not want you to film or fly your drone in their area? And what's the craziest somebody has been to you?
Let me chime in on this.
Okay.
So I was at a park and I was with Mark Taylor, a guy I used to work for, and we were doing a buddy box on this Cine Lifter drone. It's a big drone, carries a cinema grade camera, and I was showing him how to fly, teaching him how to fly. So we were buzzing around the park, and there was some people, but we were being super respectful, keeping it nice and close. And then an old gentleman got really frustrated, and he had his wife with him. So he came up, and we were both in the goggles, and he came up to us, and he started yelling and pushing us and screaming at us. And I said, hang on, wait a second, let me land my drone. And so I landed the drone, put it down, and then Mark took over. And, you know, he's trying to calm him down at the same time he's yelling at him. And then Mark looks at the guy, and he's like, if you don't calm down, I'm going to bend you over my knee and spank you. And the dude's wife at the time was trying to hold him back, but she ended up just laughing her ass off, you know. And so that was the story, but it was funny because it really put him in check, and it was hilarious at the time.
I don't think I've dealt with someone who was like, even after explaining to them, was still irate about it, if you will. But as Don said, like most of the instances where someone has come up and asked the question, you know, just talking to them helped the situation a lot. There was someone that still, like, you could tell they still didn't like the idea of it being around. For example, middle of Midwest Texas, just 8 miles outside of Sweetwater, Texas, we were doing a transmission line inspection, and it just happened to be on the same, you know, in the same property that a guy's ranch was. And this guy came out with a go-kart, you know, coming out, talking to us like, you guys with the government? Immediately, you know, those kind of questions came along. Nope. Commercial company here, just doing transmission line inspections for the utilities company. You know, we're here, take a look, you know, you see what we see and all that sort of stuff. We're not going over and looking at your house that's over a half mile away to the west, apparently. And, you know, even after explaining that, calmed down. And, you know, as we landed, as we were packing up, getting ready to move on to the next section, he's like, I better not see that thing over my house. At least it didn't come up with there will always be an individual that, you know, that you come across like that, but at least he wasn't irate about it. So
You almost got Yellowstoned.
Yellowstone?
Get off
James,
my
what
ranch.
do you
Get off my ranch.
I haven't seen that show yet, so I'll have to.
what do you call those individuals that are irate, that you're flying in the air and thinking that they're spying on them? What do you call those individuals?
Concerned to citizens.
Okay, well, that's putting it nice.
What do you call them, Don?
You call
I
them.
think say it on the podcast.
I think we all know that those people are called Karens.
Oh,
Running joke.
Uh-huh. Yeah. But in any case, it's all with that being said, there are things that operators and individuals in the industry can do to make it so that, hey, you know, listen, we're going to be flying here. We're not trying to spy on you. We don't care about what you're doing in your back backyard. By the way, if you're bathing in the nude, don't be out around this time. If you don't want your picture showing up, on a project or something or a 3D model, no one wants that. But
Somebody might.
Had to throw that in there, huh?
but, but in any case, for the individuals that like aren't reaching out, right? That are obviously like just hovering over someone's home, trying to look into windows and things like that. Those times can be very obvious. So I think in reality, what could be done in this situation is that, again, as the bill stated, without being more further defined, it's going to cause some legal clashing on the federal level and the state level. Not that it's not a good thing to have. You want people to be able to defend their privacy, especially with the individuals that could be nefarious. But there has to be a clear line. It can't be a gray area. So maybe this is something where, like, what would you guys think if state legislators actually went to federal legislators and said, hey, your current rule, this 18 USA 32 Alpha that prevents the damaging of any aircraft, could we create a separate rule? Like that rule applies to manned aviation, but about unmanned aviation, and actually come up with something that clearly defines what's allowable in certain condition and clearly defines that. And then as counter UAS technologies come along, like jammers or anything like that, clearly define how those can be used. And like if you choose to use kinetic force, what's the restriction on that, or so on and so forth, right? Because all they're trying to do is make it safe while also being able to ensure people's privacy is intact and that people feel safe. So how do you find the balance for all those considerations?
How do you think federal legislatures like the FAA would respond to state legislatures with proposed solutions, like coming to them with proposed solutions, given that those federal rules are written in black and white? Do you think that there's any wiggle room, some budge factor?
So I think it's better received than if not coming to them at all. It's better. It's the situation of, informing and negotiating rather than doing it anyway and begging for forgiveness later. Especially when dealing with between state and federal. So in this situation, I mean, here's the deal: the Federal Aviation Administration and the IPP, the Integrated Pilot Program, back in 2018, 2019, they went out to the industry to say, like, hey, how can we work more closely with the industry to better set a standard of rules for operating drones commercially in the national airspace system, doing it safely, doing it better, and actually taking the feedback from people in the industry to do that. I mean, that's half the reason for advance notice of proposed rulemaking comments. So if someone from state legislator goes over to the FAA or goes over to whoever manages the 18 USA 32 Alpha for taking down aircraft and says, like, hey, we need to make a clear definition and exception because now we have these drones and they're going to be staying for a very long time in our airspace and even more so prevalent than manned aviation. We need to make a new clear defined rule or a rule subset in association with this rule. So, because as we know, every rule has like a part. It has A's, B's, C's, I2, whatever. Roman numerals, you go down to it. But if someone doesn't come to and expand, you're going to keep running into these issues. If more states want to do this, you're going to keep running into this issue on a national scale, not just the singular state scale.
So let's say all of this stuff goes through. How are people even going to find out about it? I mean, what percentage of the population even knows Part 107 exists?
It's a really good question. And it all comes back to education. You don't know what you don't know. So if someone gets a drone and they're not immediately introduced to, like, if they're not forced into something that forces them to read a notice or to read a warning that says, hey, if you, before you fly, you should read up on trust or you should read up on Part 107 rules and regulations. Because again, Part 107 is only for those flying commercially for pay. If you're just flying for fun, you just need to understand the trust rules. Part 107 doesn't fully apply to you. So it's a hard thing because now you have to really work with manufacturers of not just drones here in the US, but drones all around the world who can ship to the United States and say, hey, if you send drones our way, make sure there's some way to force this person to understand this. And even then, we all know how those read and agreements work. Most people just scroll through them, hit the agree button, and get it out of my way. And if there's a manual in there, there's a really good chance that most people are too excited to really read the manual first off. So it's a true challenge to be able to say we can educate, but how can we lead the horse to the lake and force him to drink? So
Are there any organizations that are out there, or what organizations that are out there, like per state or nationally, that help educate people about these laws? Like, because if I see a drone and this law passes or bill passes, I want to shoot it down if I can. How are they going to let me know? Who's letting me know?
there's a couple out there. I mean, besides the FAA, but you're not going to see them on the news broadcasting out on a national level to, hey, don't do this. Obviously, you can work with local news networks. There are individuals out in the industry, there's bloggers, there's news networks that focus on these kind of new laws and what it means, especially kind of like the clip that I sent you guys before the podcast today. But then there's also a matter of organizations like us who can put notifications out there, have conversations like this, and really say, hey, before you go and do this, think about the ramifications, or think about what the possibilities are, or think about what is considered actually reasonable within it. There's even AMA, which is the Aircraft Modelers Association, which essentially is the original RC aircraft organization before Part 107 was even a thing. So they're out there, they do educational as well. And then there's other organizations out there that educate in the communities as well. It's just not, those kind of organizations don't have the resources to make it really in front of someone's face on a daily basis like you would have on, CNN, Fox, ABC News, all those kind of news networks that could talk about this stuff. But again, they're not going to run the same thing all the time as informational. They're going to run it when it's new, and then it's going to go away. So for those who didn't pay attention or remember it, because a lot of people have things going on in their life, for those who don't remember it and don't remember seeing it on the news, don't know what it's about, it's still going to get waysided. So there's so many different challenges with this. There are things that can be done to reduce the effects, but to truly make it a something that works for everybody, it's a challenge. Don, what are your thoughts?
Well, you can go and source this information, but really, if you're a drone pilot, whether it's recreational or commercial, I think it's still advisable for you to go and get your Part 107. That's your baseline information. From there, you can determine what's important and what's not important, because those are the base rules. And if you don't have those, all this extraneous information that you pull in is going to seem like base rules to you. But really, FAA governs the airspace, and whether you're a recreational pilot or commercial pilot, it's always a good idea to know those rules.
Yeah, and I mean, even here at SDI, outside of our regular, the certificate and the associate's degree program, we have a Part 107 test prep course that fills you in on all those rules. And you can go ahead and just, it's an easy Google search away. And it's a reasonable price. And there's a lot of resources online where you can study up and understand the 107 rules and regulations. It's not like the information is hard to find. It's just knowing it's there in the first place. So if you're one of those individuals that now know that it's there, go for a search. Find us. You go through our course.
Don't even go for a search. Just go to www.sdi.edu. Under more ways to learn, you can find that prep course. So
there you go. You got it. Nice, Christian.
I'm marketing.
James, how long did it take you to get your Part 107 after you started flying drones? Because you and I flew drones I started in 2011, 2012, somewhere around there. And then Part 107 wasn't a thing till around 2016. So how long was your spread?
So I started flying radio-controlled aircraft in 2007, and then got into the drone space, like officially on the commercial side, in 2011. And as soon as Part 107 was announced, I think the first month that it came out, I just went up and took the test. Didn't necessarily need to study for it at that time, because luckily at that time, a lot of the knowledge was still based off of your general aviation private pilot's license knowledge, except of course the new set rules for weight configuration and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I went and took it the first month and got it right after. Passed with a, I think it was a 92 on it, first time taking it. But then again, I was already in it for, well, it was almost 9 years flying a radio controlled aircraft before Part 107 was released.
Do you think it was beneficial that you had experience flying drones or aircraft before you took your Part 107, or was that not even a factor when it first came out?
So I think it was beneficial radio controlled the flying radio controlled aircraft part, not so much, but flying them commercially under the FAA 333 exemptions when those were first released was what I think made me more knowledgeable and see the reasoning for the Part 107 because of all the additional factors that you really need to take into consideration once you're doing it for pay, once you're doing it as a professional facing individual and not just someone who's out flying for fun. Because, for example, if you're out flying for fun, you're flying in FRIAs like free zones or anywhere where it's okay to fly where you don't need a drone tag or just flying for enjoyment. It's there's not too big of a deal. But if you're flying around, coming back to this again, knowing that you're flying around in a safe area, in an area that's more rural, because where I started flying at was a cornfield just outside of the town I grew up in. That's not a big issue for people. It's when you're flying, hovering in place over someone's house that people get concerned. But I think that, again, going back to answer your original question, it was the professional side of it that really made me need to know more on the aviation side. Because for your FAA 333 exemptions, you had to have at least a sports pilot license to fly. It wasn't just a 107 license. You actually had to go and fly a manned aircraft for 25 hours at the least to get your sports pilot license.
Yeah. And back then we didn't have any night rules. Like we couldn't fly at night. And now
Nope.
it's just training online, making sure you have anti-collision lights, that sort of
Correct.
thing.
Yep, visible 3 statute miles. That's correct. So it'll be interesting. Just like rules, more clearly defined rules were developed from going from the FAA 333 exemptions, because those were you were only cleared up to 200 feet for most of those, and you need a certificate of authorization for each operation you did. Then, so seeing it go from there to 107, 400 feet, all these other clearly identified rules and regs associated with it, I think eventually we'll be seeing the same thing here. We got individuals that are trying to propose rule sets that are, that make sense in a way for privacy and safety concerns of individuals against those who are flying these things with nefarious intent. But the more these things are talked about, the more people are educated, the more people get exposed to them, the more they come up with, okay, what definitions do we need to put in place that makes this easier, safer, and addresses the area of concern that individuals have associated with it as well. So, all right. I think that's it for me.
I have one last question for you that's kind of related to this. I saw this week in the news or some stories of drones that were controlled via fiber optic cable. Is that to fight things like the geofencing and the radars that would shut them down?
That is for jamming. Yeah. It's an anti-jamming measurement essentially. But yeah, that's one way to do it. Why do you ask?
It blew my mind that they could fly via fiber optic. And I'm guessing, is it any slower, faster than radio controlled, or?
Arguably, I think it's probably faster. It's a direct line to the drone instead of, going radio signals. There's always latency with radio signals.
Yeah, and even when it's barely noticeable, there's still latency there. Where fiber optics is near zero. Even when we're talking about like 0.01 milliseconds.
And what do you guys know? Like, how far can it be controlled via fiber optic? Like,
as long as the cable can go.
at a certain point, is that cable becoming so long that now it's heavy and
That's
can hold it down?
That was my question, actually, as you were talking.
All depends on weight over distance, right? How much is used, the weight of the fiber optic cable, because those things are like threads. Have you seen them? It's insane.
In my mind, the closest thing I can think of is, when I'm deep sea fishing, I have a monofilament line, and I know it has the resistance of water. But even when that's hundreds of feet down below the surface, that line becomes very heavy. I know air will still have drag on it, so is that creating a weight element to it? So I don't know.
I wonder if anyone's actually done a thorough test on that, because really, like that implementation is being used primarily over in Ukraine. I don't think there's anybody really using it over here, really testing it to a degree where it's like, hey, you can fly this far under this much thrust and weight propulsion capability until you start seeing drag. I mean, one application to look into is like the drone power washing. They have to carry a lot more weight. So the question is, how high can you go with one of those before it becomes too heavy for the aircraft to lift, and how much rope is hanging? So maybe there's some research there too, but then again, that's still a pretty new application. So it's a good question. I think can't answer it directly.
So if you know anything about fiber optic drone flight, reach out to us. Put it in the comments. Let you make yourself be known.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll have you on the podcast.
Yeah. So. Let's get them on here, because I want answers myself.
The only reason fiber optic would ever be a thing is, I think, to stop the radar jamming, because that's a thing over in Ukraine. They're trying to jam drones so they, don't do their thing or whatever. But
all right, the internet says a mile of standard fiber optic cable could weigh between 150 to 500 pounds, depending on the cable construction, number of fibers, and the material.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So
150 pounds.
A smaller 12 fiber indoor cable could weigh close to 150 to 200 pounds per mile.
Indoor. Well, the question is, like, is it like at the same diameter? Are we talking about like the actual silk thread or the thickness, or what are we talking about here?
Yeah,
because what we're seeing on the drones is like literally it's the size of a silk thread. It's tiny.
Yeah.
But a mile of that, it's going to add up.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'd really like to know. So yeah, no, please, someone reach out, put it in the comments. Call Christian, please. We need to know the answer.
All right, let's wrap this up. Who has some final thoughts or questions or conversation pieces? It looks like Steve had chat GPT'd something. So let's see what he's got.
Well, this actually says using the silk thread fiber optic cable. If it's just the bare optic glass, it could only weigh 0.5 to 1 pound per mile.
That sounds
seems
a little
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And how stable is that? You get it caught on a tree branch or, something like that?
That's the other challenge. Like, what environments can you fly through with that trailing off the tail of your drone? Ugh. More
at what point, like, could a large dragonfly run into it and break it?
Or a dragon,
Yeah, or a fly.
My.
The spiders start making webs on it. Anyways.
I have a
right,
final comment for state legislatures. I think they need to be educated on the federal rules, because some of these guys make up rules and they don't have their Part 107 certificate. They don't know any drone rules, and they just go out on a whim and say, hey, within reasonable force, you can do this. I think we have to find a way as drone educators to be able to educate not only the public, but also these state legislators that make up these ridiculous rules.
I'll tie into that a little bit here, and I agree. There needs to be education. There needs to be, and this is kind of what calls back to that idea of having a conversation with other legislators, with industry contacts and professionals, because if you're working in a bubble, it's hard to be educated on something that whoever is in your bubble or within your circle doesn't know about. So when you expand your contacts, expand your resources, expand to discuss with other organizations who this bill might affect, i.e. federal or UAS industry professionals, you expand on the amount of knowledge that you learn and gain from those individuals who have a different focus or have a different level of understanding that can educate you, or you can be educated on and learn more about and say, oh yeah, leaving it just off as using reasonable force that could cause a lot of chaos. Let's not do that, right? It's kind of that come to self-realization. So final thoughts on this is like, it's the desire behind it is understandable, but the way it's being executed is not well thought out to the point of education to where you want to collaborate with the industry, you want to collaborate with federal as well.
Steve, what you got?
Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, SB 1422 is a reminder that drone laws are, one, getting more serious. They're getting more complicated. So whether you're flying for fun or for work, you got to know what the airspace is you're in, and you also have to know what the rules are going to be on the ground. Otherwise, you're going to end up in trouble for something you didn't even know was illegal.
And that happens all too often.
Sure does.
Yep.
Good point,
All
Steve.
right. Well, I hope everybody enjoyed the episode. I'm going to put some links in the description about our Part 107 exam prep course. But as always, if you're looking for more information on our certificate and our associate's degree in uncrewed tech, go to www.sdi.edu, hit the request information button, put your information in there, and we'll reach out to you, answer any questions you might have about it. And there's some good information on that website as well. But for the flight path, I've been Christian. Thank you, Steve, James, Don. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.
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 Thanks, guys.